Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. So welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. Today we have Clark, the co-founder and managing partner of MedPro Wellness. Clark is a fellow 40 under 40 NJ Biz recipient here in 2019. Congrats, my man. We got to celebrate last Wednesday now in Freehold, New Jersey at I Play America. It was a pretty good time. I'm excited to have him on. Today we're going to talk about his topic, which is improving health and productivity in the workplace. And I think this is I'm gonna riff for a little bit here before Clark comes on. But I think this is very important because we keep talking, especially here at Domain, about culture. How do we give back? How do we educate? And I think one piece of culture that still hasn't been fully addressed, other than what you're seeing in the big SaaS companies, is this health and wellness and taking care of your employees of the long grind, which we were talking about before. So Clark, welcome to the show. Happy to have you, man.
Yeah, thanks for inviting. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so before we jump into this topic, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you guys are up to nowadays at MedPro Wellness?
Sure. About 8 years ago, I had this itch, and it wasn't being scratched when I was working for someone else. So I quit my corporate job and started building technologies around health and wellness. Many bumps, bruises, tears later, we came up with this concept called MedPro Wellness, which is designed to drive better engagement for large organizations to help their employees and their families live healthier. So it's been a fun ride, and I'm truly passionate about the subject. I've been involved in health and my own personal wellness for years. An athlete, I've competed in Ironman races around the country. So I dedicate a lot of my time to investing in myself, and I want others to do the same thing as well.
I love that. All right, diving into the topic, what do most companies get wrong with health and wellness?
Well, what's crazy, and if you look at some of the RAND studies, so the large organizations that populate and publish results, 85% of the large organizations, large employers over 1,000 or more, offer corporate wellness programs. So you're like, that's great, congratulations. But I often say in my own office is what makes sense in the boardroom doesn't make sense on the factory floor. So Of those organizations, you bring it all the way down, and less than 25% of employees are actually participating in these programs. So the big miss out there is it makes sense in the boardroom, but not on the factory floor. How do we drive better, more meaningful engagement for employees to take advantage of these programs that we know time over time deliver results and deliver outcomes for these people?
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. So how can companies improve this engagement? How can they get this 25% up and get more engagement from their employees? And let's say they don't even have a wellness program. Where should they even start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back down to what matters the most for the people who are using the program. So we look at this problem all the time. And most times we go in there and we're a small, scrappy startup here in New Jersey, and we're competing at these huge legacy companies. And we say, well, we can do much better than what they've done in the past. And here's our engagement results. We have 75% engagement, which people are like, how is that possible? It's because we really meet people where they are. Individual goals are what really drive this. So your goal for your health and wellness is different than my goal for my health and wellness.
Correct.
And typically speaking, when we have these corporate wellness programs, it's top down. So we're going to do a smoking cessation program. We're going to do a weight loss challenge. I'm like, I don't need to lose weight. I don't smoke cigarettes. What am I going to do for myself? There's nothing for me. I'm totally disconnected. And this happens time and time and time again, because many organizations typically focus in on the disease state programs. So disease state programs are really where you talk about diabetes, cardiovascular disease, metabolic conditions. These are the biggest movers of revenue, meaning the cost and the return to those programs. Okay. So most times these organizations focus on those, typically speaking.
Gotcha. Very good. All right. Tell us a little bit about this focus on culture and benefits, and how have they changed the way that companies are now competing with talent? And I'll preference that with, in the IT space, our number one issue, whether you're talking to us or you're in our peer group out in Denver talking to companies all across the US, their number one issue is, how do I continuously get great talent? And they can't find it, right? So how do you guys approach this with the culture and the health and wellness?
Well, you remember this famous saying, money can't buy happiness?
Yeah.
I mean, So people say, well, that's not true. And there was a great study done by Princeton University in 2010. They published this, and they looked at corporate salaries. And they found that once you get above $75,000, there is no increase in employee satisfaction for any raises after $75,000.
Yeah. Wow.
So look at it on the flip side. If you're at $40,000, your compensation only really represents about 12.8, 13% of your satisfaction. So where most people are spending their time and resources are, let me increase salaries, let me do that. But really there's an entire shift happening, primarily started out in Silicon Valley, with how do we attract the most competitive talent in the most competitive talent marketplace in the world. It's through endless vacation days. It's through bring your dog to work days. It's through amazing company culture. And even here in our office in Cranford, New Jersey, we have a 2 and 3. So you work in the office 2 days, you work at home for 3 days. And we found that works. People love it. They love to come in. They're more excited. We have the ping pong table in our office. We do corporate events. We do the 5Ks. So we have a lot of fun with our team to really invest back in them as well.
Yeah, I'd like to dive a little bit deeper on the 2 and 3. How did you guys come up with that?
Partly it was initially started because our office was so small and our team it was like, we have this great idea. You guys can work at home more often than not. But we found is that we were able to attract talent from much further away than what we normally would, because no one wanted to drive an hour and a half to our office every day. Yeah. But starting to enable a little more flexibility, we developed technologies to ensure they have everything they need at home, and they performed much better. And if we look at the data on how they perform in their home or at the office, they do better at home, which is even more incredible. So they're not sitting at one of our seats out here. They're not using our coffee maker. They're not doing all those things, but they're at home. They're dialed in. They're appreciating it. I'm sure they're doing laundry, which I would do it if I was working at home. Well, that's okay. They don't have the commute back and forth, and their satisfaction went through the roof. So it's really great.
Yeah, and not to toot our own horn, but you mentioned the technology and the ability to work productively from home. I think as we continue down this road, it's something that we get requests for all the time. How can I continuously give my employees the right equipment they need to be productive at home, whether it's phone calls, direct phone calls, conference phone calls, a Zoom communication system like we're on right now, the monitors, how do we set people up, the internet, how can we get all this working together? And then obviously the security piece of it. But that's a good point in merging both the health factor, the benefits there, as well as the technology so everybody's happy, the organization in terms of productivity, as well as the employee as well. It's good stuff.
This isn't your grandmother's workforce. No. We don't need to treat it like it was 50 years ago, where you're coming in, clicking a time card and going back out. That's not what I want for my company. It doesn't sound like that's what you want either. And we attract people that think like us. So if you want to click the time card, get into a cube, guess what? You're not a good fit for us. And that's okay. I'm okay to tell people no, because we want to create that culture that really attracts people that care, and they want to give more when we need them to give more, but we want them to have a great quality of life as well.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's go to ROI, which I know is always a hard topic in sense of it. It's sometimes hard to prove ROI, but what have you guys seen in ROI in investing in these health and wellness programs?
Yeah, so the big numbers out there that everyone kind of relies on is the RAND study, and it is basically for every $1 spend, it's a $1.50 return. So that's kind of what everyone uses in their mind. I mean, we brought on organizations and companies here in New Jersey, 100 to 200, 300 employees, and we typically are doing a 3-to-1 ROI. So for every $1 they spend with us, we're returning 3. And it goes back to that point I just subtly mentioned before about targeting disease states and the kind of the boardroom factory floor. And what's really incredible is if you target conditions and health conditions that people have it's highly personal to them, you return $1 to almost $4 ROI back to the organization. So when we roll out these programs, we do things for healthy individuals to get them really excited and boosting that employee workplace, the morale and things like that, because it's really important for those companies. So those things impact your presenteeism and your absenteeism. That's the grade numbers. Like, how do you really do that? You're going to look at sick days, and it's a little fuzzy, but what's easy, black and white math, is we're going to target this disease, and we're going to make sure people here, we reduce their risk down, and there's a direct correlation with spend.
Wow, that's really good. And I like this concept that you keep touching on about how you're addressing the program to that individual. And that's got to be intensive in sense of like, you're not just coming up with this big program and take it or leave it kind of thing. You're actually looking at the individuals and then breaking it down for them as how can this program work for you?
You're nailed it. Exactly the reason why we have engagement that's basically 3x what normal companies do, because we take a totally different approach. And this is not by accident. This is by design, because we landed a very large corporate wellness client here in New Jersey, and they brought us out there, and we were doing everything everyone else was doing. We're like, oh my God, this isn't working. We're not getting any adoption. No one is moving the needle. We're like, we have to think differently about our business. And we just basically ripped everything apart, started from scratch, and said, what would matter if we were here, hearing the same message our team was telling us? And that happened 5 years ago, and it changed the course of our direction of our business, because we took every client and used that approach with them.
Yeah, that takes a lot of willpower. I was listening to a podcast this morning actually on exactly what you just said, in the sense of like, they were talking about that the ability to, you had a product that you sold, and the ability to say, I'm going to hang that one up to get better results for my clients. I give you a lot of a lot of respect for being able to do that to drive better results for your customers.
It's not easy. And I remember one good story of this. I had my developer at the time. We had just brought him on. He was exceptional. He sold his last company. So this is the real deal guy. This is 3 years into my first company. And he came and I go, we'll just do an assessment. We're going to add more things on top of here. So I had a few people in the room with us, and he was coming to present his assessment to us of what we needed to change. So I said, Clark, we're literally going to have to take what you have and throw it out. I held back the tear. I asked the room to be cleared, because I was like, holy crap, how is this possible? I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars developing this program. So he just mapped it out to me. He said, what you have is not going to scale. What you have is not going to deliver what you need. And I had to make a decision. A very hard decision was to continue down a path I know was going to end to failure, or to scrap it and start all over again and build from the ground up. And we did that. And our business has grown, basically doubling year over year since that point, because we take that approach. We're willing to invest into the future and not be narrow-minded or short-sighted on, we're going to keep going this way no matter what. We bring in good experts, much like we are for companies. We're health and wellness experts. If you want to get healthier, I guarantee you my team could get you there. If you want to get healthier, if you don't want to get healthier, we can't help you. So same idea with this idea of bringing in technology. If people want to be prepared for 10 years from now, you'll get them there. But if they're not, it's not the right time for them right now.
Exactly. Good stuff. So the final question I want to ask you about is the future. Obviously, you're in this every single day. You're seeing companies that are more progressive in this area, and then the companies that are completely lagging behind. But what is the future of healthcare, insurance, and these wellness programs? I did come from the commercial insurance space, not from the healthcare side of it, but I am interested. Insurance companies were all about risk management, and I see these wellness programs as a big benefit on the risk management side. So what do you see going on in these three areas, and how are they connected?
Yeah, so some big trends out there, one of which is how our medical community is delivering services. So typically speaking, in the past, it was fee for service. So every time you saw your doctor, they get paid regardless of if they got you healthier or not. So fee for service. There's a big shift towards pay for performance. So now the insurance company is going to give you money, and you're going to manage my risk and my health for the course of the entire year. So whether it takes you 10 visits, 1 visit, or 100 visits, it doesn't matter. So the idea is that physicians and the medical community are now reinvesting into health and wellness programs and lifestyle management programs to reduce your risk of long-term chronic disease, to improve your health through non-pharmacologic agents, is a growing and popular trend. So that ultimately had a lot of things kind of came from that, which is now providers and other insurance providers even are doing extenders. So they're looking at lower cost alternatives to delivering care for their plan members or for their corporate companies. So they're not leveraging the very expensive physician that's sitting somewhere. They're using health coaches. And we found that there are this growing trend of people going into this health coaching industry. And now the state of New Jersey and others are certifying them. So they're becoming board certified. They go through a licensing, they go through the testing. So we have some of the first board certified health coaches in the state of New Jersey working for our company because they're treating and delivering care much differently than it's ever been done in the past.
That's awesome. I'm curious, what does the start of an engagement with MedPro Wellness look like? Like a company that hasn't done anything in this area, what would the first 4 weeks look like?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is what's important to the company and what's important to the employees. So we always start with doing an assessment. So we're going to ask the C-suite, what do they care most about? Usually it's boosting employee workplace morale, reducing some healthcare spend. But then we're going to do an assessment of all the employees because we can't say what people should do unless we know where they are. So we do a baseline measurement on everyone we meet. We'll do segmental body composition analysis, which is basically a really cool machine that could tell you your body weight, your body fat percent, where you have any changes in your body. We'll do waist circumference measurement, blood pressure measurements, and ask you a variety of questions. And based on all this information, we're going to put together a program for every individual employee, but more so, we're going to tell the organization from bottom up what the risk is of the company and where we think the dollar should be spent.
Awesome. Very good stuff. All right. We're going to flip the script a little bit and we're going to get into knowing Clark a little bit personally. Clark, if you were to go back to your younger self, say let's go 3 years out of college, what advice would you give your younger self based on where you are today?
Yeah, I would say be patient.
That's a great one. That's my number one.
I think as a young, aggressive professional, you expect things to happen much more rapidly. But what I've learned over the course of, even 8 years. So 8 years ago, I quit my job. And I remember leaving and some senior managers were like, Clark, you're crazy. Others were like, Clark, you're brilliant. People were like, you're going to be a billionaire, all these things. And I was patting myself on the back and saying, that's right, I did it. I walked away. But what I found is that it's extraordinarily difficult to get to be successful running your own business. And there's a variety of stresses and challenges. And what I had expected to happen did not happen, which is I had expected to have success much quicker than I did. And it caused a tremendous amount of stress and pressure that I self-inflicted on myself. And it caused me to spend, of course, even driving the business forward, I spent ways that were a little foolish. So going back to what I mentioned before is that I'm willing now to rip my entire company and my entire technology to nothing to start again, because before I wouldn't do that. I'd keep spending. I'm like, we're just there. We're almost there. And I just want to take a breath, do my strategic vision, and where am I going to go, and then take my time getting there.
Love it. That's outstanding. All right. Next question is around, I would typically ask it as books or books that you've gifted to others the most or that have impacted your thought process the most. I've recently adapted that question to say any type of media channel. So that could be podcast, whatever, blogs, something like that, but books as well is included in that.
Okay. Yeah. I'll go back to one that really made a connection with me in the past year or so. And this went back to kind of my path of running my business, which was I was very stressed out, very anxious, felt like a failure, all these things that entrepreneurs go through. And I was sitting in the back of my house at the time. My wife wasn't home. She was my girlfriend at the time, but she wasn't home. And I was just thinking, like, I can't believe I'm such a failure. And I can't believe I'm not going to have this success. And I probably need to go get a job. Like, these were all things that going through my mind, because as an entrepreneur, you just have this endless race. There's nothing that ever lets you get off the run and say you've actually achieved something. So I said to myself, I need to feel success again. And I thought of what is the most ridiculous challenge I possibly could come across. And I remember the wild world of sports, watching these athletes during these Ironman running across and stumbling across the finish line. I said, I'm going to do one of these things, and I'm going to do it next year. And people thought I was absolutely nuts. But 8 months after saying that, I went to Lake Placid. I was on the starting line. And 16 hours, 45 minutes later, I walked across the finish line with tears in my eyes. I was exhausted. I had to have the medics help me out, but I did it. And what I learned is that if you want to have tremendous success, you have to be willing to suffer a little bit. So I started really responding to that way of thinking through challenges. And I came across an individual, Dave Goggins, who's a former Navy SEAL. So he has a great book that just came out recently. I used to follow him on podcasts, but he just wrote a book within the past year called Can't Hurt Me. And it's if you read this, or when you read this, which I strongly encourage you and every other person to do this, you'll realize that what we have, you and I, we've had so many more opportunities for success. It's a much easier path for us. And when you read about what he went through to get to where he is today, you realize you haven't pushed yourself hard enough. And I think of that every day. Have I pushed myself to the brink every day? Most times the answer is no. So I want to change my mindset. So I give this out to some people on my team that I think that really would resonate with as well.
Yeah, that's great. He's definitely one. I've been following him on this different social media channels, and he's posted recently a couple of his, like, this is where I was, even 10 years ago, and this is where I am now, and all the things he's done, and you're like, holy shit, this is crazy.
Anyone could do that. And that's right. Yeah. I think of going back to my experience as an Ironman, I thought it was impossible. And what I learned is that my once impossible is now my normal every day. So there's a whole community of people that are doing this. So David Goggins, he's maybe the exception to the rule because he's in the top 1%, but yeah, everyone could do what he's doing. They just have to have the mindset to get there. And most people give up before that point. Most of my time is spent on kind of removing the self-imposed hurdles. And you kind of heard me touching a little bit, but the mindset shift for me is just such an important aspect of I don't know if you noticed, but I started Scarlet Startups. So it's the largest.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
The largest kind of alumni and student entrepreneurial organization at Rutgers. And I did that just because, basically the guys down in Princeton were doing stuff, but there was only a few of us that were doing it at the time. And we kind of grew this thing, and now we've done a variety of programs for students and for alumni. But the common question I hear is people saying, I want to do this, but I'm like, just stop. Stop the buts. Just go do it and break down this huge, audacious goal into simple, bite-sized pieces that you can consume all day long. And all of a sudden you'll look back and you say, I just did this thing. I just ran this Ironman. I just quit my job. But most people are unwilling to go there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So give me a little details on the Scarlet Startups. Because I've seen it a bunch of times. I've never actually made it to one of their events, your events, obviously. Yeah. But we've been doing the Princeton Tech Meetup.
Princeton, Vanu, and those guys, I know them really well.
Yeah.
So similar concept. The speakers I attract are going to be early stage entrepreneur speakers, meaning that they speak to that audience.
Okay.
So I'm not heavy on tech. I'm heavy on entrepreneurship. So I've had Jeff Braverman, CEO of nuts.com, who's an incredible speaker. I've had a few others that are maybe not as prominent, but just have really incredible stories, like another individual that ran from California to New Jersey and talk about overcoming obstacles, things like that. So I always look at how do I get people to actually take action versus we're going to go through this complicated, complex, whatever technology. That's not what I focus my events on.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome stuff. What is a nonprofit or charity that you yourself personally or MedPro Wellness supports that you'd like to get some recognition to out to the audience?
Yeah, so last year we actually founded MedPro Cares, where we bring programs to underserved communities for free, health and wellness programs. And last year we supported and sponsored an individual in Newark to to return back to a normal life, to reduce a lot of the stresses they have. So every year we invest in our local community to help people get back with health and wellness programs.
That's awesome. We'll make sure we link to that specific site too, to give it some recognition. And my final question is, who is a thought leader or a practitioner, maybe even a mentor potentially of yours in the past here in the Northeast that you'd also like to give some recognition to that is doing really great work?
Yeah, I think of one person in particular, Jim Barrood, who is the former president and CEO of the New Jersey Technology Council. I've known him for probably 7 or 8 years now. Right when I quit my job, I met him when he was back at FDU. And at the time, he told me he was going to NJTC. And I said, well, that's not for me. It's not for a young technology company. It's for like those old guys and others. And he has done over the past 5 years an amazing job of changing the kind of culture and changing the, the things that I care most about and helped me. And I've seen now he's moving on to other things now, but he's been a great thought leader in the community and someone I definitely think is worthy of a lot of recognition.
Yeah, I can second that. I got to spend a decent amount of time on the New Jersey Tech Council advisory board, getting to meet him personally from an insurance perspective, from an infrastructure company, technology company's perspective. He just really, you're right, he grew that. He moved them to New Brunswick as well. They have some cool spaces there. They're always doing networking stuff. Really good vision that he put in place there.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Clark, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It was great seeing you last week as well. Congrats again on the 40 under 40. Thank you, sir. This is Mark. He is the co-founder and managing partner of MedPro Wellness in Cranford, New Jersey. If you're thinking about any type of wellness programs for your organization or your healthcare insurance cost got skyrocketed, give Clark and his team a call. We'll make sure we link to all their contact information. Thank you so much, Clark.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.